Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Snyder, and I am the founder and CEO of Thistle Technologies. And before I started this company, I had a number of different roles. I was a CISO, I was a software engineer, a security researcher, security consultant. I was the CISO at Square, at Fastly, at Mozilla. I was the chief software security officer at Intel. I used to own all the security and privacy features for iOS and OS 10 while I was at Apple for almost 6 years. I owned security sign-off for the Windows operating system while I was at Microsoft for multiple revisions of the of the Windows operating system. And prior to that, a software engineer and a security researcher and a security consultant, which is to say, I've had 30 years in the security industry, and I've seen a lot. And one of the things that I got to see in my role at Intel was all the work that we had done for these general purpose operating systems like Windows and Linux and even OS 10 hadn't made its way to devices. All this work in terms of building security resilience into these systems. And it's not surprising that we didn't get the same sort of investment in devices, because devices are resource constrained. They were, for a long time, single purpose. They didn't necessarily have the same kind of robust operating systems that we saw in the general purpose platforms that you'd find in the data center or you'd find on workstations. But the problem is they have all the same threats as these systems. And as we connect them to more and more complex systems, to real world systems that are that have real world physical impact when they are compromised, we start to see kind of this growing trend where you have incredibly high impact considerations attached to all the same networks, running systems with almost the same complexity, but without the same sort of security investment. And we start to see more and more of these compromises. And not everybody who builds devices recognizes that they've got the same kinds of security considerations that other kinds of systems have. So one of my favorite examples is this fish tank monitor that was used to compromise an entire casino. Because I'm sure the makers of this fish tank monitor weren't thinking that they had significant security requirements, right? But here's the thing: once the device is compromised, it's on the network, right? And it's a fantastic foothold for the attacker to use as a launch point for attacking other systems from a privileged perspective, because they're already on the local network. And so the attack surface that's available to the attacker from another device on the network is going to be greater than they would otherwise have trying to attack their target system from the internet. So even systems that you don't traditionally think of as being security critical end up still creating a significant degree of security risk. And then these devices are, for the most part, black boxes, which is to say that they are, for the CISO, for the IT organization, mostly uninspectable, but not to the attacker, because the attackers have debuggers just like you guys. And so they may be opaque from a management perspective, if they're even manageable. A lot of these devices aren't. And whether being able to evaluate whether your device is in a known good state, for most part, these organizations, incredibly difficult, if not impossible. To be able to return it to a known good state, incredibly complex, might actually require being physically present to do some sort of factory reset, if that's one of the options available. And then how do you evaluate that you've actually succeeded? It's incredibly challenging. And for a complex device that might have multiple chips with different firmware on them, something complex like an automobile or an MRI, there's no way of knowing that all the systems have been reset. So it gets more and more complex as it goes on. And the stories that come out are they grow with complexity. But additionally, like, we've got all kinds of examples. And like, my favorite one in the last couple of weeks has been that in the Bay Area, in San Francisco. This is where I live, right? In San Francisco and in San Jose, and it's actually showing up in Seattle. Folks have been changing the configurations for the computers that change the streetlights. You know, you push the button, it says, "Wait, wait." That's what it says where I live. Wait, and they've changed it to have AI versions of quotes by Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, saying things that they probably didn't actually say, and they're inserting that into these smart meters. They've been compromised because they were deployed with insecure configurations. But yeah, here's another system that nobody necessarily expected to have these kinds of high security requirements. But we see everything from MRIs that are compromised to have malware, and the attacker doesn't even necessarily know that this is an MRI. They're just like, here's a vulnerable system. It's running code that I recognize as being vulnerable, and it's present on this system, and I'm going to compromise it. They don't even necessarily know that it's an MRI. So we are seeing that even though there's a set of devices that folks recognize as having high security requirements, like medical devices and the control systems for power and water and telecom equipment and controllers for financial transaction systems, that sort of thing. People recognize that they have high security requirements. All kinds of devices have high security requirements because they are present on systems, on networks that also have high security requirements. So, in addition to the set of things that we know how to do, we also have the problem of bugs. And you're going to have bugs, security bugs, no matter what you do. After 20 plus years of security investment at Microsoft, and they've built a more robust application security program than I've seen anywhere. And I'm happy to have been a significant part of that early on, but developers still manage to introduce new vulnerabilities. So you just have to accept that creating vulnerabilities is just a fact of life. And if you incorporate third-party libraries from open source, from commercial sources, yeah, there are going to be vulnerabilities in those systems. So mitigating the bugs that you have, that's an objective, absolutely. But being able to recover from bugs is also incredibly important, which is how we get into update. Your update mechanism is a critical part of your security capabilities. And if you don't have an update mechanism that you trust to recover, right, then you're not going to use it. And one of the problems we see with other update mechanisms out there in the world is that hardware systems have different requirements for reliability than other kinds of software, right? So if you've got a 1% failure rate and you've got, let's say, 100 million cable modems deployed in the world, and you've got a security vulnerability that is critical, but a 1% hardware failure rate for a firmware update, which is what's required in order to fix that vulnerability, you are almost certainly not going to deploy that fix, because a million customers calling you up and saying, hey, my internet is down, is complete non-starter. And oh, by the way, the fix for those folks is to take a computer, plug it into take the USB router, download the firmware, use a USB cable from that computer to that router to flash the firmware on that device to get that person back up and running. And how did they download the firmware in the first place when their computer was down? And oh, how did they call you to tell you that their internet was down? They're probably using VoIP in the first place, right? So the set of problems are just kind of infinite if you have update failure. And this goes to, like, if it's an ATM, it might require technicians to visit every single site if there's a failure. If it's a failure in an automobile update, then they have to do a recall and bring it back to the dealership. And we've seen that one recently. Actually, I think that was BMW who had to bring folks back for a firmware update. One of the examples in the previous slide was Sharp had to send people out into the field, into people's homes to fix these, because bringing your TV into the shop to be addresses it is a huge challenge for users. If we're talking about a factory floor, we're talking about shutting down production, and the cost of addressing this is probably more expensive than the risk of having that vulnerability compromised to that specific factory. And if we're talking about a satellite, that's just gone forever, right? You're not getting that one back if you have a hardware failure for update. So the threshold for being willing to fix that security vulnerability it's high, and it's probably too high. So how do we address that? Well, we have to make update more reliable. So the current state of the world is that the set of security capabilities are hard to do right and really easy to get wrong. And when they fail in pretty spectacular ways. So that's the first step here. And then additionally, this security expertise is really specific. It's specific already in the application security space or in the systems space, where you have to be a software engineer and you also have to be a security expert to build these kind of systems reliably. But when you talk about devices, now you additionally have to be an embedded engineer and understand all the different systems that play together. So the set of folks who are able to build these things are in high demand and short supply. And then additionally, you've got to the cost of keeping these folks on the team is also incredibly expensive. So one of the things that we end up seeing is that there are some teams that can afford to build a hardware team like this, and it's incredibly expensive, and it's out of reach for a lot of teams. And for the teams that have it, and we're talking about like big teams like at Apple, we have that hardware team at Square, where we built this point of sale device. We had a hardware team. A hardware security team, incredibly expensive considering the overall engineering size of the organization. It was an incredible chunk of the budget here compared to let's say another software engineering endeavor with a similar engineering team. And the threats keep changing, so you have to constantly do work. So what ends up happening is if you have these sorts of implementations, they're built differently in every different environment and to differing degrees of security resilience, which is to say, very often not, because building a security feature has two significant parts. And the first is the functional aspect, like it needs to do the thing. And when the thing is done, you need to be able to evaluate that the thing is done. So encrypt the thing. But that's actually where a lot of development environments end. But you actually have to build it to security resilience, because you're not just building a feature, you're building a feature that people are actively trying to undermine. They're actively trying to prevent the thing from being encrypted, or to compromise the source of randomness, or to pull out those keys, looking for side channels, looking for ways to undermine the security protection that you put in place. So building to security resilience is a really different thing than building a security feature. And then additionally, because a lot of these systems are critical, it has to be reliable. A lot of these security capabilities are in line, so they have to be reliable. Because again, back to this business of update, things that you put in line are going to impact reliability. So the problem is complex. So, like I said, I've been in this space for a really long time, and I've seen great changes happen in the security industry, and it happens for one of two reasons. The first is there's a lot of pain. So one of my favorite examples of this is at Microsoft. When I went to Microsoft, they were feeling a huge amount of pain. This was 2002. They were feeling a huge amount of pain around Melissa, I love you virus. And then like a couple months after I got there, it was Slammer and Blaster. And it was not just incredibly painful for Microsoft, it was painful for their customers. They were basically throwing a fit. Like Walmart had retail down for hours because of Slammer. And a very large national bank in the U.S. had to go visit every single one of their ATMs to update it to get out of this. Like, to say that their customers were unhappy is putting it mildly. The entire ecosystem was in chaos, and they made a huge investment, and they've made a huge difference in terms of security. But I would love for the devices space to not have to go through that degree of pain. So what does it take? What is the easy path out of here? That's the other way things change. It's when the things that we know how to do become easy enough that we're able to do them. So we know as an industry how to build security resilience into systems. We know how to do it. And these systems have enough resources to do it well. But again, back to implementation, it's hard to do. So what is the answer? How do we make it easy? So where to start? We want to make sure that we can build the capabilities to reduce attack surface overall, right? Because again, there's going to be problems everywhere. But if you have fewer entry points into the system, you can make your system much more resilient. So attack surface reduction. We need to implement data protection. We need to make devices more manageable. We need to make it easy to recover, and we need to be able to evaluate what happened, right? So auditing and evaluation. And then we've got this data protection aspect, right? A lot of people are putting more and more critical capabilities, data, or collecting interesting data off of these systems. We want to make sure that we can protect those AI models, protect that data that we're carrying. So that's a lot of things, and it's really hard to do. So this is a very long path to say this is why I believed that this problem is the biggest problem in the security space. And for having worked in lots of different kinds of security problems, it's saying a lot to say that this is the biggest problem that I see in the industry. So the idea is to build this set of capabilities that are generalized across lots of different kinds of devices, right? Here's a bunch of things that are hard to do. Once upon a time, lots of different development environments had their own cryptographic libraries, right? And we would find, as security researchers, problems in the implementation of the cryptographic libraries. The cryptography was solid. The problem was not the math. The problem was the implementation. And that's how cryptography was compromised. And because people were rolling their own implementation in all these different environments, we got to see the same problems over here would apply eventually over here or over there. But as an industry, we eventually decided that what we should do is leverage a few robust implementations that were done well, and by cryptographers and people who understood how cryptography implementations fail, and leverage those reliable, robust implementations. So that model is what we're doing over here, building a security platform that takes these capabilities that are, again, hard to do right, really easy to get wrong, make it easy for developers to incorporate those into their devices. So the Thistle platform has capabilities including mitigating firmware tampering with robust over-the-air. So again, we want to make sure that it's easy to get update going, but update is not enough by itself. Being able to tie it into secure boot, so your implementation is able to have the device verify the kernel has been signed before it loads, secure boot. We want to make sure that your update mechanism is tied into this secure execution chain, so that update is verified. That update is verified before it's deployed, and tied into that secure execution chain as well. we want to make sure that this is easy to adopt, so it's got low resource requirements for tightly constrained devices, and make it easy for the over-the-update device to be managed using the control center. Once you have a hardware root of trust, you're actually able to do all kinds of things like secure configurations deployed or manage the integrity of those AI models, and all of this ties back into these capabilities. And then, of course, it has to be auditable. Auditable firmware so that you know that you're in a state where your device is deployed to the configuration level that you expect, deploying software, running software that you deployed, and not your friendly attacker who decided that they would prefer their code to run on your system. Yeah, we want to make sure that those things are all in place. And this allows you to develop confidence in your software security supply chain. And that root of trust enables all these different capabilities, from secure configurations, deploying your AI model securely, et cetera. But getting these capabilities to market in time, that's the critical piece, because again, as an industry, we know all of these capabilities are critical to making those systems secure, making those systems robust. But getting it into your product is the hard part. So making it easy for those developers to get the capabilities into their project, making it easy for developers because it's interoperable with the things that you're already doing. It's easy to scope your project out and say, okay, this is what it's going to take. If we want to implement secure boot, I can actually see the end of this path, because the implementation for a lot of teams is not even the longest timeline here. It's the testing, because again, it's in a critical path. So it has to be highly reliable. So leveraging an existing implementation that's already well tested, that's already highly reliable, that already works with your hardware, that allows you to get to market much quicker. So the update flow here is that you upload your firmware and then you update your firmware. We try to make it as simple as possible, and it really is very easy to get up and going. We've got a video that shows doing it on a Raspberry Pi as an example, because it's a platform that everyone has in their pocket. That shows getting it done in a few minutes. So our website's at thistle.tech. You can go ahead and see that video there. And there's lots of ways that this can be used. It's appropriate for devices that have high security requirements, but honestly, every device has security requirements. So being able to recognize that this is going to be a critical piece of the strategy for not just making sure that your device is security resilient, but that you're able to recover from the inevitable security issues that you will eventually find. And that's true for systems with high security requirements and for even consumer systems. So the overall system is there's a cloud service, which is the backend services for things like update management and for firmware signing. And in the near future, we also have remote access. But the device connects to the network, identifies that there is an update available, downloads the update, verifies it based on that hardware root of trust, and then is able to deploy, lay out the update and reboot. We've got AB failover, so if there's something wrong, the device is able to detect that and fail over to a known good state, and that's the critical piece there. We support a number of different platforms here, and critically, this is a SaaS service. So there's a set of developer tools and libraries that you incorporate into the device, and it's the backend service that's the SaaS model. We want to make sure that we support your platform. So if you see a platform here, if you see a platform that's not here that you would like to be supported, we are adding support for all kinds of platforms. Actually, every couple of weeks. So, if it's important to you, we might be able to move it forward in the queue. And I would love for you guys to come talk to us. We are at E2, which is that corner in the back there. And yeah, we would love to have a conversation with you about your project. Any questions? Yes, please.
So, you might already answer this question. So, thank you. I just wanted to ask, so do you know when you said you have a device, right, and it checks for updates, right? Is that just done through the internet, or like simply as like if it's connected to Wi-Fi, or does it have other ways? Just wanted to re-clarify that part.
That's a great question. So again, are there multiple ways that I can check for these updates? So yeah, if you are deploying a device where it is appropriate for them to call out on the internet to our services, that's a great way to deploy it. But you can also deploy this so that it connects your service or your customer service for folks that build, let's say, a device that might be deployed in multiple environments. So let's take a security camera as an example, right? You build a security camera. It's not appropriate for the device maker of the security camera that might a corporate security camera to have all the devices check for an update on Tuesday, and like everyone who deployed your security cameras goes down for an hour. Like, no, we don't want that, right? So what you want is for company A, who's got a deployment of your security cameras, those devices are managed by company A using either our website through a potentially white labeled version, so it looks like your management console, or it could look like ours. That's fine. Or they can deploy it as part of their cloud. Additionally, for environments with the highest security requirements that use an air-gapped network, so let's say industrial manufacturing is an example that might happen, or deployment that's, let's say, like popped up kind of deployment where they've got a number of devices that they need to manage for like military purposes, for example, being able to deploy it from a workstation that the technician in the factory has on their laptop is another way to deploy the update service, and your devices can be configured to know where their update mechanism is. So that's a great question, and yes, we do have a number of different options for that because there are different environments with different security requirements. Some folks just need something to get up and running, and leveraging an existing deployment that we host is the right way for them to do that. And some folks have the highest security requirements, and they want to make sure that there's a way to update devices even if they're on an air-gapped network, because as Stuxnet showed us, even an air-gapped network is not really it's more permeable than we want to believe. Thank you very much for that question.
Thank you very much for answering my question.
Any other questions?
Just a very quick one. Any mission being Blackfish, someone's Walker.
Thank you so much. I noticed one of the platforms that you support is Qualcomm. I'd estimate if I was to try and get a software team to use Qualcomm's secure features to make a secure product, when they're new to Qualcomm, it would probably take 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
How long does it take using the Thistle platform for them to use your platform and secure a Qualcomm device?
Okay, for the security capabilities, there's no overhead in terms of learning a new platform for this capabilities, because they write to the same API that they would write to if it was supporting a different platform. So if you were using Thistle on this platform, you'd have the same experience using Thistle for your security capabilities on that platform. Now, not every feature is necessarily available on every platform. So with that caveat, it's designed to be a minimal lift for the development team. That's the whole point here. We're trying to make it easy for device developers to get this up and running really quickly. Now, that said, if you don't want to move your developers over to a new platform, we can support the platform that you've already chosen. So yeah, we'd love to. But we're adding support constantly. So if there's an existing platform, instead of moving your device developers over to its other platform, because we know the security capabilities are not the only burden for moving to a new platform, right? We want to be able to support the platform that you're already on.
Thanks so much.
Yes, go ahead.
Wish I need the microphone. No, just gonna ask, just out of curiosity. So, in the title, it said moving models to the edge, or AI to the edge. So, the security wise, what would be the use cases of the machine learning models? Like, I'm not sure. I just wanted to ask that. What is it like in identifying threats or in the updating stage? Just wanted to ask.
So these are your models, not ours. This is your data, not ours. But an example would be, let's say you are a company that builds tractors, and you have reduced the ability to identify weeds, right? And you've reduced the consumption of pesticide by 70% because you're using AI to identify weeds and only targeting weeds now, right? But over time, your model gets better and better. So you want to update your model, but you don't want other folks to have your model, right? You want the folks who have the tractor to have the model, and no one else, right? So being able to send that encrypted, being able to validate that it came here, because you also don't want necessarily folks introducing any chaos into the system. You want only your updates to run on the system, only your configuration changes to change configurations on the system, and only your models to be the models that run on the system. So being able to both encrypt them, have them be decrypted on the system, have them verified. So we've got an integrity issue. We've potentially got a confidentiality issue here, and we want to support both of those capabilities. So that is a reason why you would use these capabilities to secure your AI models on your devices using Thistle Technologies.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you so much for coming.